Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead video. So in this one here, I wanted to talk about Season 5, Episode 12. This episode was a lot better than I remember it being. I thought that the first episode of them going to Alexandria was a lot of just like reactions to stuff, but there was actually a lot of moments in here that really was set up for a lot of the story that, happened in the first half of Season 6. And a lot of just like I really like thematically what this episode discusses, because the idea of allowing a place like this to make you weak after you've been going through so much, and you're so used to just like what is a very interesting concept that our characters haven't really dealt with in a while. And it's really interesting because if you look at Rick, he spent so long at the CRM, right? And it didn't really necessarily make him weaker. Like, yes, he was in the military, I guess, so there is that aspect to it. But as Rick says at the very end of this episode here, it's not going to make us weak, because if they can't make it, then we'll just take this place. So before we go any further, obviously make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. I'm going to be doing a lot more rewatches like this, just like from individual episodes. And I might honestly like just continue on from where I'm at right now. I don't know how far I'll go, and if I'll go all the way until season 9, or if I'll just, stop at some point in season 6 and then go back at some point. I've seen a lot of people saying to like go back and just like do like individual arcs. I've seen that comment a lot of just like, well, go and watch like 2 episodes here of like this one little story arc, jump around here and maybe there's 3 episodes here, or just whatever, right? Like just to like certain arcs or whatever. And I think I might eventually do that. I think right now I'm just really enjoying this whole survival part to it. Like I watched episode 10 of season 5, which was, the very, I think that was the most like, this is them trying to survive, and it's really hard to survive. But that was the most like survival, story that The Walking Dead's ever done. Like season 5, episode 10, like it really, really was. And, now we're in episode 12 here, and they're in Alexandria. And, we know now that this is an amazing place, and they do, they go through a bunch of stuff, but this is a place that is worth keeping. And so I might watch until I feel like, this part of the story is kind of over. Who knows? Like maybe when it goes into the savior stuff, it's a little too like, this is a different arc here. I can feel this arc starting. So let's go into, a different point. Cause I do want to go back to like season 3, season 2 even. There's a couple of episodes I want to go back to checking out there. But eventually the plan is to review every single episode. Yeah. So in this episode here, they all arrive in Alexandria, which was very cool to see, and it all happens pretty fast. Obviously there was a lot to get to in this episode, but them arriving to Alexandria, they just allowed them in like right away, which was something that, obviously going all the way up until the last season, that was something that everyone struggled with. Like, you don't allow new people in, and this and that. They go back and forth quite a bit based off of stuff that they deal with, right? But yeah, they all arrived to Alexandria. We meet new characters. Nicholas asks them to turn over their weapons, and Rick's just like, well, we don't even know if we want to stay. But then we see Rick inside of an Alexandria house, and this was the first time we've ever seen Rick inside of a house in Alexandria, which is funny because that's something that obviously for the rest of the series, like he was in those houses a lot, right? And this was the first time we've ever seen it. Deanna is there as well, and she introduces herself. She films their talk, and I do gotta say, like, it's really crazy that this hasn't come back at some point. And I feel like if they were to do a season 2, and I'm gonna do a video on this because I think this is a really interesting idea for a season 2 to sort of, if you can get to some stuff here anyways, thematically, and if it can make sense with the story. But Rick, he made it back now, so he's gonna go back to Alexandria. Where is this footage here of Rick, right? Like, where is this footage of Rick's first interview when he first arrived to Alexandria? I feel like it would honestly make a really perfect story. Like, Rick makes it back. Maybe one of the first things that happens in that first episode is just how, he's trying to fit in with everyone again. How it's like, it really does mirror when Rick first arrived to Alexandria in the very beginning. And he's just looking around like, wow, everything is even better than when I left it. And like just looking around like, oh, I remember this. I remember when we came here, that wall came down. We had to do this and that. And like just talking about memories like it happened so long ago, which is crazy because we've lived all of it, right? And just like going through all of that. And then maybe at some point, because he's having such a hard time trying to fit in and trying to feel comfortable in Alexandria again, the first episode of all of this would be honestly really interesting. And it really should focus on Rick trying to feel more comfortable again. And imagine he comes across a tape of when he first arrived in Alexandria, and he watches it and he's just like, wow, I remember how that used to feel. Like, that was so long ago, and we came here. I brought Judith here. She was just a baby, and now look, like all these years later, we're still here, right? And I feel like it just makes so much sense for what The Ones Who Live is about. Not even just that show, but just like if they were to do a new series or if it's a season 2, just with what, the stories that they tell, I think it would work so well. Deanna, though, mentions that she was trying to get back to Ohio, which I actually never caught this. So I know in season 11, it was confirmed that Pamela Milton actually knew Deanna. That was a very, very interesting Easter egg and a really cool connection that they actually made there, that Pamela Milton knew Deanna because Deanna actually says in this scene that she was a congressperson and she was trying to get back to Ohio, but then the army stopped her. And so she decided to stay in this place here. And I really like that because that's a connection to the Commonwealth right there, all the way to season 5 here, right? Which is insane to think about. Deanna was actually on her way to Ohio. If she would have made it there, she would have been at the Commonwealth this entire time, right? But she didn't. So she built Alexandria, which is like, yeah, just an incredible story overall, right? And we learn here that they've been behind these walls this entire time. They haven't left these walls. It's literally been their home since the beginning. And everyone is just very shocked about that. Rick tells Deanna, don't let people in. And this conversation just gets very interesting because you really do see the extremes of both sides. And Deanna mentions that she exiled 3 men. And Deanna says, you know what, your son, your daughter, they should have a place to grow up, which is just like all of this here, this whole meeting. It means so much now. Back then, it didn't really mean as much, but considering how far everything has come now, looking back at this moment, it's like, wow, everything was like right there. Like, this is why I think Gimple has handled the Walking Dead universe so well, because there could have been another showrunner there, right, that handled all of this really badly, that basically messed up this arc and this didn't mean anything. I know the whole Carl thing, I know people bring that up, and that's that, I get it, but like overall, I think he's done a really great job. But Deanna says that she wants Rick's help. She wants his help to actually make Alexandria a better place and a place that people can survive in, because they're already, a really good place, but they need people here that are going to keep this place safe. And it's funny because she mentions the time. It was like 3:37 or something like that, 3:37 p.m. And Rick, like Andrew Lincoln, kind of like he notices that. And I don't know if that was like, a part of the scene because it just kind of happens randomly. But Rick then fixes his watch and then he probably adjusts it to 3:37 because he probably had no idea what time it was. That the watch was probably just at like whatever time. And I know in a previous episode with Aaron, he was like, well, you have an hour. Then at one point he's like, well, you have 43 minutes or whatever it was, 40 something minutes. And so to me, I think he's had that watch for a while. The time was obviously wrong, but now he adjusted it. So obviously now he has the right time, but they're all forced to put their guns away. And first of all, we get our first scene here of Carol acting, which plays a role a lot in this whole like Alexandria arc. Rick and Carl are given a house and them just being in a house again. It was just like, wow, and again, I just came off of the story of them trying to survive and all of that. And it really felt like they were just out there for forever. And just to have them in this house, like, just I remember at some point, I don't know what season it is. It's season 5 maybe, or season 6. But the conversation of like, yeah, we're all playing house or something like that, basically, that comes up. And it does feel like that at first. It feels like when Rick and Carl are there, like, oh, I don't know if we should, like, do we just act like a normal family? Like, oh, we're just going to be here. And yeah, like Rick's just like, well, I'm going to make supper, or I'm going to like, I'm going to watch some TV or whatever. And Carl's going to be up in his room, playing video games or what have you. Like, are they just supposed to start doing things like that? Like, are they just supposed to like live? It kind of feels a little off, but what was even more insane was that Rick actually shaves. Rick actually shaved his beard, and this was like the saddest thing ever. I still remember watching this for the first time, and when he did that, I was just like, no, like, why'd you have to do that? Because it was just like the coolest look that Rick ever had, like the crazy beard with like the longer hair and all of that. He just looked so cool, especially when he had the murder jacket and all that, right? Like, it was just a really awesome look for Rick Grimes. And when this happened, I was just like, oh no. And then, he still had the longer hair, which was really cool. But then we meet a new character named Jessie, and she cuts Rick's hair. And I was just like, no, why this too? I totally forgot that all happened in the same episode. But yeah, so Jessie cut Rick's hair, and Rick, I guess he started to feel more like himself, just more like season 1 Rick again. I guess he felt uncomfortable being more like himself, like his old self, which is kind of an interesting way to look at it. Daryl also, like, I don't know where this ends. I don't even know if it ever really ended. At some point, I know it does end. I think Aaron from what I remember, was the character, like Aaron and Eric, they helped Daryl, get a little more just like used to being in Alexandria. But Daryl's not listening to anything. He's just sort of doing his own thing here. And Deanna is just trying to understand, what Daryl is just like as a person, all of that. And Carol even reacts to Rick's face. She just kind of looks at him like, wait, what? And they all decide to stay in the same house. Very, very smart. Michonne also reacts to Rick's face. I love that. Deanna reacted to Rick's face. Like, everyone was noticing, like, you actually shaved your beard. And Rick, he's having a hard time sleeping. Like, the first night there, Rick was having a hard time sleeping just because, it makes sense, right? Like, you're out there for so long. You're so used to hearing the woods, this and that. If there's walkers around or people, like, you're ready, right? He's adapted really well to that world. And so being in a place like this, I think he just kind of felt like, I don't know how I feel about this, right? And Michonne's interview, Michonne, that's the one thing that I noticed rewatching this, is that Michonne really, like, it makes sense as to why Michonne and Rick eventually ended up together. She really does ground him in a lot of ways. Like, there's a lot of things that Rick, he's just so like, we need to survive this way, we need to do this and that. And then Michonne, I think she kind of sees the bigger picture sometimes. And she can just like, she can allow herself to sort of, think about like, oh, maybe we can stay here. Maybe this place can actually be amazing, right? And because she says in an interview here with Deanna that this is what they want. Like, this is for sure what they want. And, I think she knows, like, she knows Rick. She knows that that is what he wants, that it's just, he's scared, right? Rick tells everyone to explore. Like, it's the next morning. He's like, go out there and explore. Daryl's just like, no, I'm going to stay. And then an interesting line here, Rick says, Lori and him used to drive through neighborhoods like this and thought one day. And Carl later on mentioned something like that as well. And I thought that was kind of cool because, yeah, at this point, money doesn't really mean anything. Like, having certain things really doesn't matter. Like, all you care about is just surviving and making it to the next day. Being in a place like this, like, it's kind of cool and like you appreciate it because of, the old world. But does it really matter nowadays? Doesn't at all, right? There was a funny scene here, actually, that I don't remember ever happening, and that was Rick panicking because he couldn't find Carl and Judith. Like, they went missing, and he just starts panicking, and he's running around. And then Jesse helps Rick find them, and they were just, like, visiting neighbors. And the whole thing with Rick and Jesse really did start in this episode here, and it was really, looking back at it now, it's interesting. And I now that I'm rewatching this is kind of why I want to finish this next arc, and like why I think I'll probably review every single episode up until episode 8 or like episode 9, around there anyways. Like, as soon as they start to get into the hilltop and all that, maybe I'll stop there. But just this one part of the arc here, because I find Rick and Jesse very, very interesting, because the moment that Jesse does die later on, like, for Rick anyways, he just like did not care at all because Carl was in danger and he was able to just like shut himself off like that. So I want to see with like, the perspective I have now of just, what the story's actually going to be like, what was actually happening the whole time, because I haven't really rewatched this in a very long time. Carl meets Mikey, Enid, and Ron as well. We then see an interview with Carl and Deanna, and Carl says, this is the place my mom wanted for us, until he had to go kill his mom and this and that. And I was just like, wait, what? Rick went to go speak with Carl about Ron's house, like, how was it and whatnot, and they talk about what Alexandria is like. And so after the characters learned of just everything in Alexandria, learned of all these newer people, this and that, this scene here was for us, the audience, but also for them to sort of, talk about like, so what do you think about this place, right? And so they talk about Alexandria, and Rick says, it seems nice. And Carl right away is like, I'm worried that, we're going to get weak, because if we stay in a place like this, like, the people here are very weak. And if we get too used to this, we're going to end up weak just like them. And Rick totally understood that. And that was such an interesting point, and something really interesting that Carl actually caught on to that. Like, Carl saying that, I was just like, wow, I like, as if he actually like understands like concepts and ideas like that. Like, that was really cool. At night, Rick goes and takes a walk and then runs into Pete, and very bad vibes immediately. This is why I really want to watch the next episode and all that, because I'm really interested in this arc right here. Like, the whole Rick versus Pete thing was so amazing, just because that was the moment I feel like Alexandria learned of, exactly who Rick and his people are, right? And obviously everyone else at that point were like, no, like, we love this place, we want to stay here. But Rick, I'll say my thoughts for when I actually watched the episode. Carol's interview, though, I thought was amazing. I was actually laughing. She's like, oh, I miss Ed and whatnot. I was just like, wait, what? Daryl also, the whole episode, he's like refusing to take a shower. Like, he does not care. And just Carol and Daryl, talking about a bunch of stuff in general in this episode, I thought was just, it shows why they have a spinoff together right now. Like, out of all the characters, they just, they get along the best. Like, they really do. There's such an interesting chemistry between those two characters. And when you go back to these episodes, like, you really do see it. And it's so natural. It's not forced. I feel like a lot of that stuff, it's not really necessarily, I'm sure it's written, obviously, but it feels so organic from, Melissa McBride and Norman Reedus. It feels like those scenes aren't even written and they're just like sort of talking, because I just love the Carol and Daryl scenes in this episode. Glenn also had an interview and he says, we need to make this work because we were almost out there too long. And that is such an interesting idea and something I would really love to do a video on. Like, Glenn says that we were almost out there too long. Imagine if they didn't find Alexandria, like what would have happened to them, right? And that's an interesting idea that as soon as he said that, I was like, I really wonder what would have happened, because, things were starting to really get bad for them and they were having a really hard time surviving. Like, they were going to find somewhere eventually, I feel like, because there's so many communities out there, like they were eventually going to find something, but who knows, right? Like, who knows where things would have actually went? Maybe they would have turned on each other eventually, right? Like, it's kind of hard to believe that, because I feel like there were points in season 2 especially where things like that were happening, but afterwards, they started to get really strong as a unit. But like, how long was that going to last for? Were they eventually going to become villains? Yeah, just a really interesting line. Aiden and Nicholas also, there's a scene here where they talk to Noah, Glenn, and Tara, and they're doing a supply run. All of this stuff here, I will just say, like, looking back at it now, I see why people didn't like Aiden. I see why people didn't like Nicholas. Like, actually, in this episode here with Nicholas, it's sort of hard to, like, not like him, because he doesn't really do anything here. Like, obviously, in the future, we know that he almost gets Glenn killed, right? So that's a little different. But in this episode, so far anyways, I think you more dislike Aiden, just because of, they've been here for so long. Rick, he goes back to where he put his gun in that blender or whatever, and there's no gun there, so he's concerned about that. Carl actually shows up, so Rick meets up with Carl there. They kill some walkers, and then we get like the final scene of Glenn versus Aiden. And I really this was honestly one of the coolest Glenn scenes that I forgot this happened. I totally forgot this happened, but as soon as the scene was happening, I was like, oh man, just amazing stuff. Honestly, so amazing. I love seeing Glenn just like super tough like that, and it really does show, like it shows how skilled they are out there. Like, Aiden was, during that supply run saying, like, you gotta follow my rules because of this and that. And I think Noah, Glenn, Tara, I think they all kind of, looked at him like, you really don't know anything. Like, you haven't lived out there. And I knew that was never going to last. Like, there's no way they're going to listen to him the entire time. But it was just a really, like, at first anyways, it was a funny scene. But yeah, Rick and Michonne are given jobs. They're basically going to be patrolling all of Alexandria. And then the very last scene there, Rick says, we won't get weak here. If they can't make it, then we'll just take this place. And I was just like, oh man, this next arc's about to get really, really good. And again, because that was sort of a concern. Like, there was two aspects to this whole episode here where you had them just trying to get used to a place like this. And then some of them realizing, yes, we could get used to this, but are we going to get weaker from it? And then at the end, after all of it, Rick's just like, no, if they can't make it, if they're not gonna, like, basically, if they don't follow our rules and if they, can't do what we're eventually going to say and all of that, then yeah, we're just going to take this place over. And so at that point there, Rick kind of became the villain. And so I'm interested in seeing where this is going to go eventually, because like, obviously I know where this goes. I know like obviously I know where this goes, but I'm wondering at what point does Rick decide like, no, we can live here with like Deanna and whatnot. I know it had to do more with like, stuff that happened after with Pete. And I think Deanna also realized that Rick is a really strong leader. So there's aspects there. Like Deanna's a really incredible character. But yeah, I'm interested in seeing how this is all going to play out here. So for the next however many episodes, I'm going to be reviewing everything individually. So next episode will be 13, then I'll do 14, 15, 16, and then I'll do the first 8 episodes of season 6, and then maybe episode 9 potentially. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, anyways, post all your thoughts down below on this episode. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.